Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome to this 3-podcast network, which includes the shows Education on Fire, sharing creative and inspiring learning in our schools; Learning on Fire, education from sharing wisdom, not testing; and the National Association for Primary Education. Find out all you need to know at educationonfire.com. There comes a time in every person's life when you realise it's not about doing what you are told, but doing what you know is right for you. Let us take a journey of learning and discovery with the world's most successful people who are living the life of their dreams, walking through life using their inner wisdom and being of service to others. Forget exams, grades and test scores. What is your purpose? As we let go of what we think should be and learn from our elders to gain knowledge, inspiration and a true sense of who we are. What are your dreams? Does your life have meaning? Are you living a life of significance? Let's talk with today's guest. Hello and welcome as we spend some more time together on the Learning on Fire podcast. Today I'm talking to Harry Hortyn. Hi Harry, thanks for joining me and let's explore the journey of who you are.
Hi Mark, yeah, it's great to be here. So my name's Harry and I'm the founder and director of 2 organisations, Oxford Summer Courses. We run short academic residential courses in universities, and the charity Universify Education, which aims to expand access to higher education to those from disadvantaged backgrounds.
So the thing that I was really excited about when I knew you were coming on the show was the fact that not only do you have this lifestyle where you're actually obviously doing something you're passionate about and something that you're really into, but it's obviously something which is going to really, really benefit those people listening who are in that kind of teenagery years, thinking about where they're going to be going, what sorts of things they want to do, and also setting themselves up for, getting the best education they want to do. So can you take us a little bit deeper into both of those education options and the sorts of things that people could get from it?
Sure. So I guess looking back to my own journey through, I was lucky enough to have a very supportive older brother who was, I suppose, ploughing the furrow kind of 2 years ahead of me and gave me lots of advice on what to do and what not to do. And I also had a grandmother who had just retired from being a teacher when I was very young. And so I had 2 really well-informed sources of information to help me make the decisions of what I wanted to do. And I realised that actually a lot of people, aren't as lucky as that, and they don't have a supportive older brother or grandmother, or indeed, anyone who's been there and done that and can talk from personal experience about what the right options might be. So I think that's probably where the idea came from, particularly for Universify, which we kind of partner with different highly selective universities and really try and show young people from across the whole country who attend non-selective state schools what university could be for them, and that it kind of welcomes all comers and all shapes and sizes, and if you're willing to put in a good amount of hard work, then it's somewhere that you could really thrive.
And I guess that really is the key, isn't it? It's opening the door to people who think actually that's not something I could ever achieve, or I guess actually have never even thought about it even being an option.
Yeah, exactly. We have many boys and girls who come on the course, and they might be predicted very high grades in their GCSEs, but just think that, oh no, I wouldn't fit in there, or that's not for me. That's not for people that look like me or sound like me or who are from my part of the country. But actually, when you bring them in, we run residential courses. It only takes 1 or 2 days before they feel totally relaxed, totally at ease, and think, do you know what, I could really enjoy myself here and get a lot out of it.
And it's something we talk about quite a lot on this show, is the fact that surrounding yourself with the types of people that you want to be involved in, and also that you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so if your background is such that you've never had that experience, just all of a sudden being in that environment where you're surrounded by people who, one, are interested in the sorts of things that you're doing, they're also experiencing this idea of maybe I could achieve X or go to this university or learn in this particular way, then all of a sudden your circle of friends, or certainly your circle of influence, is suddenly so much better, but also much stronger and focused.
Absolutely. I think one thing that we find with the Universify participants is that they might be a bit of an outlier back at their school. You know, they're the one that does the homework or that gets the good marks or that's called the teacher's pet, or you know, that's slightly ostracized for doing well in their studies. But actually, when they come and spend some time somewhere like Oxford with other, you know, high achieving or motivated young people from different parts of the country, they kind of gel into this new social group where everyone is kind of supporting each other and actually, you know, sharing revision tips and different sources and books that they've read. And you know, the WhatsApp groups that they create are incredibly you know, incredibly supportive and very well used. So I think that there's definitely something in that you take a lot of support from your close social group, and so trying to find the right one makes a big difference. And I think there's actually one of the huge benefits that you get from, you know, spending 3 years or more as an undergraduate at university, that a lot of the argument seems at the moment to center on, is it a good investment financially? Are you going to make a financial return on your £9,000 a year fees? But actually, I think that misses some of the biggest gains that you get from university. You know, you may well meet your best friends. You may well even meet your spouse there. And I think that, you know, you can't really put a financial value on that kind of chance meeting with people that will be significant to you for the rest of your life, really.
I think that's true, and it's certainly, the more I've got into this podcasting world and the communities and the online world that I sort of now find myself in, while a lot of the courses that I've taken, while a lot of the trainings that I've been involved in to sort of learn this craft have been immensely important, it's actually the community and the people that I've met which have had the biggest influence, and they have a big influence day in, day out, because there's a question that I have or a conversation I need to have about something which I'm thinking about doing it, and that literally is priceless.
Yeah. And I mean, from my personal experience, one of my closest friends from university is my business partner and was the best man at my wedding. So I think it totally chimes with me what you're saying.
And how did the idea of setting up a charity come around? Well, I mean, you sort of said about the background in terms of wanting to give people the opportunity to do that. But it's one thing thinking that's a good idea. It's another to actually be in a position where you actually go out and create something like it. So what was the process of getting into that situation?
Sure. So when I graduated from Oxford back in 2010, I worked for a not-for-profit called Social Finance, and I'd set up Oxford Summer Courses, which was the kind of commercial summer school providing short academic courses for international students. And that at the time was a bit of a kind of what we now call side hustle, but I don't know what I called it then, just my evening job or my weekend job. And so my full-time work was with this not-for-profit doing kind of social investment work. So we did different projects for charities and social enterprises, helping them come up with business plans and raise finance or build financial models for them, as well as sometimes partnering with different government departments to help them think through what the right way of paying for success when they wanted to invest in addressing a particular social issue. So I've been having these kind of two halves of my professional life. One was running summer schools. The other was working with charities and social enterprises to come up with business plans. And so when I decided to go full time on Oxford Summer Courses, which was back in 2015, I thought I could bring these two sort of bits of experience together and focus it more on students from disadvantaged backgrounds and see, you know, how could we overcome the barriers that students from disadvantaged backgrounds, you know, face when applying to top universities.
I love that, and it's often the case, isn't it, where it's a side hustle, it's something you're interested in, it's something you're just doing, and then over the course of time, whatever that journey happens to be, there's a little bit of sort of clarity that comes in, and you realise that all these skills, all these interests can actually then suddenly turn into something different, or in terms of being expanded into something you've not thought about before. And I think that's really great, especially as you're growing up, to sort of think that everything that you do has a real positive benefit to you, even if it doesn't work in the way that you think it's going to. Actually, all those skills are things that you can take forward in a way that you don't actually know today necessarily.
Yeah, and there's maybe the kind of Steve Jobs example is a bit hackneyed now, but as a college dropout who decided to enroll in a calligraphy class and basically just follow his nose and follow his interests, actually, just as you said, this kind of the stars aligned when he actually, brought these different bits of experience together and developed a, computer company which had this sense of style and design that was just superior to anything else that was out there, and a huge part of the company's success. And you could ask whether he would have been able to bring that eye for design had he not taken an interest in calligraphy and other things like that. So I think it comes back to for students really trying to study the subject that they're genuinely interested in. I think a classic example is people who study law because they think they want to be a lawyer, but actually, you could do pretty much any undergraduate subject and then do a law conversion. And I think that in many ways stands you in better stead, because if you study what you really want to, you'll be more passionate about it, you'll be more enthusiastic, you'll put in more hours, you'll learn more, you'll get a better degree result, and yeah, it just sets you up into a much better place, really.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think the same thing applies a little bit like the Steve Jobs analogy that you had, is the fact that I want to be the next Steve Jobs. Well, actually, you don't. You want to be the next Harry, or you want to be the next Mark. You want to be the next best version of you, which only you can provide. And so it's using the stories of these people, I think, and understanding what the essence of it is, and then making it your own, like you said. And that's exactly the same, like I said, about doing that degree that you love rather than just doing what you think you ought to do, because following your passion is usually the best way to fulfilling what you need to do in your life.
Yeah, quite right. I'm not telling everyone that they should go and do calligraphy classes, but exactly that you should find out what is the equivalent for you. What is that kind of like intellectual itch that you love to scratch, and that has the potential to take you to an interesting place in the future.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I love that, because that for me always sounds very expansive. It sounds very exciting, and I think in this day and age of the education setup, it can be difficult, that because there's a lot of kind of, you have to do this, you have to do that, we have to do things in a certain way. I can't be wrong. But I think when you see that standpoint we've just been talking about what is it I'm interested in, what do I love? I'm not quite sure where it's going to take me, but actually within it, I know it's something that sort of gets me up in the morning, and from there you can use the education tools you've got, the support network you've got, the understanding that you've got, to really combine those two things together.
And it's not always an easy sell, this kind of broadly liberal arts approach to education, that I think is probably my kind of home ground in these kind of discussions, because for it's a bit different in the UK versus somewhere like India, for example, where I think the stats are that in the UK, 80% of graduate jobs are open to people with any degree. So that means unless you're doing something highly specialized, you don't really need to worry too much about your choice of degree. Whereas in India, the kind of demographics are very different. And so actually they've got, hundreds of applicants for each, graduate place, many who have got master's degrees and MBAs. And there's a kind of, I suppose, like race to the top in terms of how many degrees and can you pick up, and the sort of, how many credentials can I put on my CV to help me get ahead? Because actually there's, a huge amount of kind of labor out there for each individual job opportunity. So I find that I'm kind of, when making this sort of stance or making this kind of argument to Indian students and parents about the the value of coming over and doing a short course in Oxford and Cambridge, for example. Yeah, you have to kind of tell them about the intrinsic value rather than it will necessarily, you put this on your CV and it helps you get a job. But a lot of the education debate seems to be moving towards this, how can I, get my calculator out and find out whether it gave me a few extra pounds in my, my graduate salary. And I think that really misses a huge part of what's important about education, particularly what's important about higher education. That it's not all about an immediate financial return, but it's something that's good to do because of the skills that you gain, the people that you meet, the experience that you have, and the kind of the amount of maturing that you can do whilst you're there.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think also the one thing we do know going forward is that even with a highly specialised degree, even with all the credentials in the world, there is no sort of job for life now. And even if you're, like I said, highly specialised in a certain field, whatever that happens to be, the chances are that throughout your working life, you may be an employee, you may set up your own company, you may end up slightly diversifying, becoming a consultancy or anything like that. And so nothing is ever going to stay the same. So all those skills you've just been talking about are absolutely essential in order to meander through exactly how life takes you forward.
Yeah, and there's a few kind of stats knocking around about how most people at primary school will be doing jobs that haven't been invented yet by the time that they reach the workforce. So yeah, I think the kind of transferable skills, the research skills, analytical skills that you would pick up in higher education, I think are particularly important. But that's not to say that that is the kind of one superior option above the more vocational route. And I think that there's definitely space within the kind of tertiary education landscape for particularly in this country, for much better vocational options, and that will build skills that are slightly more practical and more immediate, but certainly not that would necessarily go out of date with a kind of technological disruption.
So let's bring this round to your experience specifically, and so what does your life look like now, and how is it different from when you were growing up?
Well, I mean, so I'm married and I live in a flat with my wife, which is obviously very different from living at home under the iron rod of my parents. No, I guess certainly I have like much more kind of freedom and control over what I do now. I mean, I think that I went to a grammar school in Reading, and there were lots of very talented teachers there, but there was a huge focus on getting good results. There was a reasonably kind of strict packed timetable, and you were making the most of every kind of minute of the lesson to try and make as many gains as you could before the kind of looming exams, which you always felt were just over the horizon. And I suppose the big difference now is that in running a company of around 40 people or so, that actually you're able to set your agenda and to some extent set the strategic direction of the company, set what you want to try and achieve out of the week. So it's very different in terms of having a kind of strict timetable where you have to be here, you have to be there by this time, you're doing this. Actually, at the start of the week, it's like, okay, well, what do I actually want to achieve out of this week? And what's really going to make a difference to the performance of the company, and what support can I give to the senior managers to help them do their jobs really effectively.
And I think that there's a really interesting thing there, because we've talked about going through school and focusing on results and academics and subjects and that kind of thing. But what I loved about what you just said there is the fact that an important difference is actually sometimes, how do I want my life to look from a practical sense? Because you could have gone from school to university into a situation where actually someone else is still dictating exactly what your framework looks like, and actually you've managed to find yourself in a situation where you have more control. You set up your own company, you do things in your way, and it might just be that that's the essence as you're growing up, which is the important thing. You know, I actually want to have control myself over my timetable or my week, as opposed to being an employee. And you might not know what the actual area is going to be that you're going to head in, but you certainly know the type of thing and the type of setup you want to be in.
Yeah, and if you're someone who doesn't doesn't like people kind of clock watching and seeing what time you arrive at the office, and for one morning you might want to go for a run, or you might want to have a lie-in, or you might want to listen to the breakfast news because something really important is happening. I very much value the freedom that my kind of setup has to do that. It's not to say that when things go wrong, or when there's a serious complaint, or when there's a kind of HR issue, or when there's a looming deadline, you have to kind of like dig in. And particularly when an organization is in the kind of startup phase, as the kind of founder, you're sort of lender of last resort when other people aren't unable, or perhaps don't have the skills or the time to do something. Often you have to be the backstop and make sure that none of the plates get dropped. But I think that there's probably at least for me, there was this turning point when we were able to bring in a layer of senior managers who were kind of experienced people, and to be honest, quite a bit more experienced and talented than me and Rob were in their particular domains. And so that acts as a kind of fire blanket to stop some of these things bubbling up to us these days.
Yeah, and it's a really important factor, that, isn't it? Is to be able to actually surround yourself and employ people that are in, like say, more experienced or have more insights than you in certain areas, because that way you can do exactly what you said. You can grow the company. You can actually be the person that you were born to be, as it were, which is to found it, is to have the insights, to see the overview and allow the other people to do the jobs, which then frees you up to do that. So I think it's a really important factor, which if you're able to put in place already is going to lead to even more success.
Yeah, and I think that there's something there that, do you like kind of structure, or do you like sort of freedom? And then you have to find a balancing point between the two of them, because too much structure and you kind of choke off any kind of innovation or creativity, and it just feel like drudgery every day. But if you don't have enough structure, then you just float around and don't really focus on the things that really are important or that make a difference. And there's certainly, I think, I've found working with a kind of coaching style and people that work with a sort of coaching management style with me, that helps the individual sort of set specific goals and say, right, the thing that's really going to make a big difference this week is if I can nail off this piece of analysis, or if I can get this report done for this person, or if I can have a conversation with this external partner and get them to agree to work with us. And so there's definitely huge value to having focus. But it's just that balancing point between some structure to kind of keep you honest, but not too much to kind of stifle you and make you feel like you're on a conveyor belt.
Yeah, absolutely. What was valuable about your school experience?
Well, I had some absolutely awesome teachers who me and my school friends, who I'm still very good friends with, could talk about and do impressions of. And I think that some of them did have a big lasting experience on us. I think that, so as I said, it was a kind of grammar school in Reading, and there was a kind of culture of sort of intellectual one-upmanship, that you wanted to be the person that got the top marks in the class so that you could rub it into your mates. It was a bit like, your team winning football at the weekend, that it gave you the bragging rights. And I thought, it's a bit like in the History Boys. I think that's probably the closest like dramatic representation, and that kind of rang very true to me. So I have a very close group of friends from my school days who we all still kind of meet up and talk about things. So yeah, certainly the friends. Secondly, that that drive to want to be the kind of top one in the class, which I think has probably matured into something less instrumental and competitive, and perhaps more actually being interested in the underlying kind of subject matter of the things that I kind of still do in kind of research and take an interest in. But finally, yeah, the teachers, there were definitely some really great people that we used to think, why aren't they off like lecturing at Oxbridge or being a member of the British Academy? They're choosing to work in a kind of what was a temporary like Horsa hut for World War II, teaching a bunch of snotty-nosed boys maths in a class of 25. But we, at the same time, we really appreciated that we had the chance to learn from some really inspirational teachers.
And do you remember which those teachers were and why specifically they had that impact as opposed to, like, say, any other one in any other subject?
Yeah, so I think that, where would I start? So Mr. Bruff, my economics teacher, he decided that he was going to teach not just the whole syllabus, but kind of like 2x worth of the syllabus. So he never really needed to worry what was actually going to be on the exams or how the syllabus changed from one year to the next. But he was going to just teach us like everything that we needed to know, and would bring in kind of reams of printouts, particularly for our transport economics lessons, of different like statistics and articles. And I think that it was a combination of his enthusiasm, but also bringing in all of this stuff that showed that economics was something that was happening, that was live, that was being kind of written about and talked about and discussed and debated, and that made a difference. I think it helped take something that was probably pretty dry for a lot of people, this idea of transport economics, and turned it into something that you felt was very real and was very immediate. And so I particularly remember that my other favourite lesson was in music. I was in quite a small class because not many of us chose to do that. And so on a Thursday, we had a coffee and cake lesson where you had to bring in a piece of music that you had listened to that you thought was good for a particular reason, play it to everyone, and then kind of do a sort of like live critique of it with the other people trying to kind of push you on your ideas and challenge what you were talking about. So I think that was interesting for me because it felt like a very mature way of having a kind of intellectual discussion about music amongst a group of people who were kind of like equals, including the teacher, and that actually there wasn't one person who was going to say this is the right answer and this is how you have to appreciate this particular piece of music, but actually it was people offering different opinions and being able to have a kind of proper, like, respectful intellectual discussion about it.
And it does seem to be a really important factor, I think, that both of those two elements, the is it relevant to me, or can I see how it's relevant in the real world, like say, rather than just a dry subject or however that comes across. And also, as we said earlier in this discussion, the fact that relationships are important, and actually to have a conversation about something you studied, or to be able to put your point of view across and have a sort of a to and fro conversation with other people as well, because it's live, it's happening in the moment, it's making you think, it's making you understand more, it might even change your thoughts, and I think that whole essence of it's in the now, this is happening now, it's a discussion that's happening now, or it's a it's a subject which is relevant to the world at large, and we can explain how that is. And I think those two things, I hear it quite a lot as I chat to people now, and I think they really are incredibly important factors.
And I think the two that I picked out were ones that were significant for me in, in the kind of sixth form. But actually, a lot of it is built on the kind of basics of just learning the basics, the kind of bread and butter, the subject knowledge that you kind of need to be able to have those sort of higher order conversations. And I think that's often something that gets overlooked. When you're in year 7, year 8, year 9, and actually it's a little bit more, you just need to kind of teach the bread and butter subject knowledge. And I think that it's almost like you're kind of eating your greens. You don't necessarily particularly appreciate it at the time, but it's actually quite important in the more of the long term to enable you to then move on to the higher order conversations later on.
Yeah, I think that's true, and I think it is also keeping it relevant, so that you've got something to attach that to, isn't it? I mean, I just thought, as a musician myself, despite the fantastic experiences I've had on concert stages and in theatres, I do remember those hours and hours and hours in a practice room just doing relentless repetition scales or rhythms or whatever it happens to be, and without those I couldn't have done the other things. But it was the fact that within that there was still concerts, there were still things, there were still performances, there were still things while you're doing that bread and butter stuff that just made you think, oh yeah, despite the fact, like you say, I know I'm eating my greens, I know it's doing me some good, but I can just get an essence of that to sort of keep pushing in that direction. And I think that's a really important factor.
Being able to visualize a goal at the end of the number of hours of kind of hard work and deliberate practice is really important as a motivating kind of factor. If you can see in your mind's eye yourself up on stage giving a faultless performance, you can kind of fix on that, and all of the hard work seems like it's moving somewhere. Whereas if you flip that round and there's no end goal, there's no concert, there's no real like reason for doing it all, then it's way less motivating, and you think actually I'll play a few of my favorite tunes, and I won't attend to the bits that I find most difficult and then actually need to work on in order to improve my technique.
Yeah, and I think something that's just struck me there as well is the fact that these goals and what you're studying for, I think the timescale changes as you get older, because of course if you think all the way back to primary school, your world is very, very much smaller. It's all about very much today, tomorrow, next week, and that kind of thing. It's only when you start to say, as you get into maybe year 8, year 9, year 10, year 11, and you're talking about sixth form, you start to get the breadth of everything, and you understand the work that you've done and how that goes forward and how the goals can be that little bit further forward. And so I think not giving yourself a hard time, just remembering where you are in that landscape of experience, so that actually things are different in year 7 even to year 9, and actually just giving yourself that sense of, it's hard to understand it when you're in the middle of it, but I think that's the reason I think these conversations are so important, is the fact that those people that are getting that opportunity, a little bit like your courses, you don't quite know what it's involved until you have a go and you have that experience, and then you start to see that bigger picture, and that's why getting yourself out there and getting as much information as you can is really important.
Yeah, and it's why Universify works with year 10s who are going into year 11, because the whole aim of it is about helping more of these young people get good university outcomes. We work much earlier than lots of the other stuff that's out there that takes people at year 12, and by then the battle has largely been fought and won or lost. But actually, when you're working with year 10s, you can really give them a huge amount of motivation by showing them what the goal could be. So, particularly through the use of like residential summer courses, you bring them into the university and say, look, this is what life could be like if you want to work hard and do well at your exams. And so lots of them go back home really fired up. and they've got a really clear vision of why they want to work hard, of why they want to do that extra early morning maths class in order to get the grades up, because they see where it's heading. And it's not just get good grades because you have to. It's you see that as a stepping stone towards something much bigger that you really want to achieve. So yeah, I think the kind of early intervention aspect is particularly important, and that's why we wanted to start off working with young people as early as we could.
Yeah, I really like that idea, and I think that, I mean, having had two children now that have gone through that kind of age barrier, there is a sense of primary school into secondary school, once they get adjusted to the fact that it's a different environment and moving around classes and all that kind of thing, you've sort of got 7, 8, 9, and then it's kind of, right, yes, year 10 now, all of a sudden we really are on that path of, exams are on the horizon. I'm studying things because I've chosen to, as well as obviously the mandatory things as well. And I think to really have that point of been actually a bit of focus and understanding, I think, like you said, it might be a bit earlier than some scenarios, but I think it's a really integral one to people's success.
Yeah, we had this amusing sort of lecture assembly that happened each year at school, which I remember. In year 7, they said, "Look, this is secondary school. This is proper stuff now. You can't coast. You've really got to kind of work hard." And then in year 8, they said, "Well, year 7, that was a transition year. You get the first one free, but this year year 8, you've properly got to work hard now." And then year 9, I think it was SATs, and then they did this. This talk got wheeled out every year. Why this was really the important year that you had to focus on. And I think the one around year 10 was, well, this is the start of your of the kind of runway towards GCSE. So that's why that was particularly important. But I generally do think there is something in that because the way that the admission system works now, with GCSEs being the only real concrete grades that you will then make an application to university for, it kind of really puts additional importance on what you're able to get in that, and also, of course, because it then determines what subjects you'd be able to do at A level. So I think that as a kind of as an important year, as an important kind of transition period, there's some good research out there why, I suppose, kind of socially and biologically perhaps that age might be important. But I think for the way that our kind of current system works, it's about that runway towards GCSEs.
Who did you admire when you were young, and what was it about that person that had such an impact?
Well, I mentioned my brother at the start, and he's definitely been a big impact on me. I think for many reasons. One, that he would be slightly better than me at all of the family board games, I think because he was a couple of years older, and I always wanted to win at those family board games. But actually, as we got older, I realised that he was particularly interested in a lot of the same things that I was around kind of politics and economics and philosophy. And I used to kind of borrow his books. In fact, he would be very keen to lend them to me and then have a kind of conversation about it and find out what I thought, but in a very kind of intellectually generous way, never trying to score a point if I didn't understand something or I didn't get something right, but actually try to help me understand things and help me get into it and get excited about it. So I think both that being sort of highly intelligent but also very, very generous intellectually, I think is a really important combination and something that I massively admire.
I think that's fantastic. I think you're the first person who's ever had a sibling as the person that they'd admired when they were young, and the siblings have such a big impact, as you said, and often for negative reasons as well as positive reasons, depending on how you get on and that kind of like say wanting to be the best and that kind of thing. And it obviously depends on your relationship, but I think no matter how you get on with a sibling, the fact that they're with you, so in close proximity, like say maybe in age and certainly in terms of your education experience, yeah, such a big impact, and I love that yours was such a positive one, and so supportive.
Yeah, and it actually came well into the Oxford summer courses and Universify experience as well, because so my brother George was an academic at Oxford whilst I was setting up Oxford summer courses, and so he helped us sign up lots of tutors, and he looked after the academic side of the program for a few years over the summers when he wasn't teaching. And then he was a founding trustee of Universify as well. He's since stepped down, but he's been kind of influential in the two organisations, as well as being influential when I was younger as well.
What was the best piece of advice you've ever been given, and who gave it to you?
I think it comes back to this thing about following your interests and your passions, and not worrying about what other people tell you should do, or what you think you have to do in order to to please XYZ, or get a certain job outcome in the future. And it was one of my former teachers. It was Mr. Holt, who was our head of sixth form at Reading School. And it was the biggest piece of advice that he gave us when trying to select a university. But I think it's not just about it doesn't work just in an education setting, but I think in a kind of job setting, in a who do you spend your time with as your friends, or who do you find as a partner. You have to be true to yourself, because if you don't, that will end up I think coming out sooner or later and making you unhappy.
What advice would you give your younger Harry self, if you were sort of looking back and sort of being that mentor, giving that advice back to your younger person?
I would probably tell myself that I didn't have to be as competitive as I thought I had to be. I think that younger Harry thought that he had to succeed by doing better than everyone else. And actually, what I would say is that just do as well as you can, and you'll be absolutely fine. You don't need to worry about doing better than, but just do as good a job as possible.
I think that's great advice. I think that being the best you, rather than being a better person than someone else, is always going to stand you in good stead, because of course the only thing you have control over is yourself, and so, like I say, while being able to sort of support and help each other in terms of moving forward, and that maybe that competitive element to some degree, it's that element of yourself which is really important. I think that's really, really great advice. What does your future look like?
Well, I'm hugely enjoying my two projects at the moment, which are Oxford Summer Courses and Universify. And I think that there's a lot that these two organisations can do, and I'm hugely excited about being a big part of that. On the Oxford Summer Courses side, I think the thing that will really make a big difference is if we can work out how to bring a similar kind of value to our in-person courses, but do this online. I mean, we run courses for about 2,000 odd people who fly in from different parts of the world to study in mainly Oxford and Cambridge and London. So they fly in for 2 weeks, and then they go back off to different parts of the world. And it doesn't take a genius to work out that this, from an environmental sustainability perspective, isn't necessarily the best thing for the planet. We do carbon offset all of the flights, but thinking long term, is this really growing that particular mode of study? Is that really going to be a big growth area? Actually, I think what's really exciting and interesting is can you bring similar kinds of learning gains, but do it online, so that students don't necessarily have to leave their country, or indeed even their home, in order to get a similar kind of learning experience. So that's something that we're putting in a lot of time and effort and resources into trying to develop. And I think that, I'd very, very excited to be a part of that.
Well, I think maybe our conversation today is an integral part of understanding that, isn't it? You know, we're not in the same place. We're talking over the internet, and yet the value that you're able to give everybody who's listening is as great as it would have been if maybe we were in the same room, but they could be listening all over the world just through whatever app they use for a podcast. And I think, yeah, is a way as the planet moves forward in the sorts of ways we want to do it, then yeah, I think that thinking is a very strong one.
Yeah, and it's how do you get people to feel like they're in a class and have that connection with the teacher and not get distracted by other things that you might well have in your in your study or your front room or on your computer, but to feel like you're in the classroom and you have a connection to the teacher, and that you're have that kind of cohort vibe of being in a class and studying with other people and getting other perspectives. Because I think just putting content online that people can sort of passively take in isn't really going to do the trick. I think there has to be human interaction in there in order to get people's attention and to have some kind of back and forth, so that you can ask questions and you can clarify things and you can focus in a little bit on the parts that you maybe didn't understand as well. And so it's how do you have that human interaction, but also a model that's scalable, because the human interaction requires humans, which is more difficult to scale than a purely tech-based solution where you can just give many more people access to the same platform. So that's the question that we're currently thinking about, is how do you square that circle?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? I know when we were chatting to Melissa Webb on our English podcast season on education on Fire, it was her online platform was based around Zoom calls and the fact that there was this interaction, there was backwards and forwards, there was a study they'd done that they were bringing to their particular class online, and I think she even said that they had almost like a classroom play area before they even started, where you could come online and just chat and talk about what you've been up to before, and which sort of gave that sort of community and that sort of social element to it. But as you said, there's one of her and however many people that she has within her class, but if you've got many thousands of people doing that, then of course, as you said, the scale option is harder to do. But I'm sure with the ethos and the understanding that you've got, you'll manage to, like you say, get that square peg in a round hole in a very successful way.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely ways that technology can help, and having a sort of blended model that's using kind of online content plus classes plus tutor-led bits plus live lectures perhaps, and yeah, I suppose it's about trying to get a good number of high quality teachers on your book, so that you can book them into the right times of the day, so you can serve time zones across across the whole world. But it's a very interesting challenge. We certainly have not yet arrived on the solution that's going to change the world yet, but we'll work on it.
And finally, what podcast, book, video, film, song or resources had the biggest impact on your life, and why was that?
So I absolutely love listening to Freakonomics. I think that they have some really interesting speakers, and they've done a big series on kind of behavior change and growth mindsets, and they get in all of the leading researchers to explain the experiments they've done, explain their kind of research methodology, what you can take from it, both from a sort of academic perspective, but also from a individual perspective. Like how do you get as an individual? I think they did an episode. It's like how to become amazing at anything, and it's like who wouldn't want to know that really? But I think it's a good mixture of being kind of entertaining and kind of holding your attention, but also smuggling in a bit of economics and psychology or science in there, so that you're actually getting something from it. So I enjoy that a lot.
And for those people who are excited about exactly what it is that you've set up and the great value that you're providing, what's the best way for people to find out more about it?
Yeah, so we're online. It's Oxford Summer Courses. If you Google it, and universifyeducation.com, and you'll see it all there. Or I'm Harry Hortyn, and you can find me on LinkedIn, which is where I post all of my musings and company information. So happy to hear from listeners who who are interested in the same things that we've been talking about, really.
Great, and we'll have links to all of these on the show notes for this particular episode on educationonfire.com, so you can have a one-stop all the way through and just click through to get all that information. So, well, thank you, Harry, for sharing your wisdom and allowing us to learn from your experiences.
Brilliant. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for listening to the Learning on Fire podcast. For more information, please visit educationonfire.com and follow the links from the homepage. Education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.